A little while back, I made a video on the potential Gus Fring spin-off that some people were hoping for, and I spoke about how it wouldn't work out. After I posted that video though, I noticed that there were a lot of other ideas that people had for potential Breaking Bad spin-offs, and so I wanted to discuss all of them and see if there's even a slight possibility for them to hold up to their predecessor. And I'll rank them too, because why not? I want to start off with what I would consider the least likely show to actually appear, which is the Walt Jr. spin-off, or otherwise known as Better Feed Flynn. I don't think this one would actually work at all, but I've noticed that a lot of people were bringing it up because they were wondering what actually happened to Walt's family after he died. It is a bit odd to wish for an entire series just to answer one question, but either way, we actually already have a pretty good understanding of what happens to Walt's family after he dies. It didn't look like they were doing so well financially, but we know that they should get roughly $1 million once Walt Jr. turns 18. But people are more so wondering what they will do with their lives since, you know, they are related to Heisenberg. It's actually pretty obvious, at least in my opinion, what happens to Walter's family. They're all depressed. The last time Walt met Skylar, she is an absolute wreck. There is a sense of clarity once he finally admits that for the entire time he was in the meth business, he was doing it for himself. But she's still going to be a wreck after that and will probably never recover. I don't imagine the life of someone who's just trying to get by every single day, staying at home, hiding away from the rest of the world, all that interesting. Walt Jr. will most likely stay the same though, maybe with some anger management issues. He cares a lot about his family, but he's also been through so much that it's unlikely for him to be a normal kid again. I would assume that he's just going to stay low key and have a small friend group and just try and get his grades up, then get a normal job. He shouldn't be harassed by anyone years after Walt's empire falls, especially if they drop the White family name and instead just take Skylar's maiden name. So it's pretty clear that these characters don't need a show, but if they were to do one, there's only one route I can see them go down, and even that is flawed. In a potential Walt Jr. sequel, they could have him sell drugs to get by, and after doing this, he realizes more about why his father did the things that he did. I saw this idea pitched on one of my comments on one of my older videos, and this wouldn't really work for a number of reasons. There's no logistical reason why Walt Jr. would go into selling drugs, since he already has $1 million. His resentment towards his father would also probably stop him from ever coming into contact with drugs for the rest of his life. He would never even sell drugs. My biggest complaint is that even if he were to sell drugs to get by, that's not even somewhat similar to the reason why Walt was cooking meth. Walt did it because of his pride, and he didn't want to take money from someone else. He did not need to do it, and even if Walt Jr. came to terms with that fact, there's no need for an entire show based on that one singular plot point. I'm gonna have to put this one as a C. I forgot to make an F tier, but that's okay. C will be good for now. Okay, let's do an easy one. Minerals, featuring Hank. This one's interesting to me because I probably only saw 1 or 2 people mention this idea, but I couldn't really tell if anyone was serious about it. Hank already had a character arc, a massive one, that had no blank spaces. He lived and he died. What else is there to tell? If it were set before Breaking Bad, then it would be set when Hank was a lot more arrogant and a massive show-off. I'd also say that he was racist back then, since he kept calling Hispanic people. I don't know if they meant to make him seem like that. They probably just thought it was okay to call criminals that in 2008. If I were to entertain the idea, then I'd have to assume that it's just a buddy cop crime show, which means that it'd be a massive tone shift. Hank did say that back in season 1, that he put away some meth cooks that were ranking in easily somewhere high in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, so maybe he could go up against one of those pretty high level players in the game. But without the character development to increase the tension, it'd just be a show filled with dull, flashy moments, and they wouldn't even be able to get too gritty with it, because it wouldn't make sense if all of those events never impacted Hank in any way. Easy D tier. The Salamancas. The series about how the Salamanca family became one of the best in the drug game, and why they became so feared. This one is probably the only one that could work, or at least be good, but not in the way that you're thinking. My pitch would actually just to be to steal the House of the Dragons idea and set the series 100 years back before any of the current Salamancas from Breaking Bad were even born. Think of it this way. There is 1918, World War I just ended, and you've got Mr. Salamanca, a guy who's got to raise his infant grandson all alone because his son died in the war. With nothing but resentment in his heart, he chooses to get into the drug game, which would probably be difficult to do back in those days, specifically in Mexico, though they could go in any direction with the series. It definitely end up retconning some minor stuff about the Salamanca family, but it's the only way I can imagine developing new characters with a potentially brand new idea. And though it might seem like it's a carbon copy of Breaking Bad because it's about a desperate man, let me say that it only seems like that because of the way I simplified it. Anything will sound like a copy of one another if you try to simplify the plot points. A show gets unique once someone puts their heart into it, because at that point, it begins to write itself. I'm going to put that as an A tier, because as good as it might be, it's not going to come close to Breaking Bad. I'm also biased for this because I just came up with the fucking idea, but whatever. Better Fuel Huel. This would be pretty boring, if I'm being honest. He was hardly a criminal, he was doing stuff that anybody could do. These characters that ran off after the events of Breaking Bad are trying to stay low-key for a reason. They're not going to be able to get away with anything else they do. We know that from Better Call Saul. Same could be said for Bill Burr's character QB. They're not going to do anything that's interesting in a sequel. All they could maybe do is a redemption arc kind of thing, but it ended up being so forgetful that there's no real reason to even tell that story. Easy D tier. Here we got Mike Show and Chuck Show, which has a great title pitch for it. Better Fuck Chuck. I know I like the sound of that. Sorry, I just laughed at my script. So pretty much these backstories are going to be telling us exactly what we already know about these characters. It's just redundant, really. But the reason why people want a Mike Show is because they say it'll be kind of epic. And some people want the Chuck Show purely because of the name, or because people want to see Chuck in his prime. These two ideas kind of remind me of those crime or law shows that just never end, and they're the ones that are designed to solve all of their problems that rise from the start of the episode by the end of the episode. That way people can just pick a random episode and watch it without context. Mike is a character who did some bad stuff in his past, but back then he was at his nicest, really. He was only a dirty cop because everyone was, and he left the force after having done at least some good things. Going back to that era, like I've said, will just show us stuff that we already know about. If you want a show that's purely filler, use a new IP. Don't drag these characters in the mud for no reason. It's a waste of talent. D tier. The Mockumentary. The Mockumentary would be kind of good, I'm not gonna lie. If you haven't seen the American Greed parody Better Call Saul did for season 6 as a promotional piece, then I recommend it. It's the perfect balance of humor, it's not too much, and it doesn't take away from the serious atrocities that these characters committed. I'd say this is another A tier, as long as they only do mockumentary shorts, and it has to be on a real criminal, like people digging into Jesse's backstory. A show about Kim. I'm not going to say the name for it. This is really just going to be me explaining why there shouldn't be a show about Kim, because it's a ridiculous idea. At the end of Better Call Saul, we're left to assume that Kim will either lose everything in a lawsuit or get back on her feet and become a lawyer again. The reason why we don't know where her fate ends up is because at the end of the day, she decided to take that risk so that she could live freely and happy again. While she was working someplace outside of the law, she was basically just putting on a show, which she's done multiple times in the entire series. She's pretending that everything is okay and that she can live with everything she's done. But that false truth could only last so long until she burst into tears. She confessed her lie so that she could live a life worth living, which involves being a lawyer. And whether it means she is sued for everything she has doesn't matter, because she'll die doing what she loved. Kind of like somebody we all know very well. Kim's show would be unnecessary. I'll put it at D. But if there was an F tier in here, I would have done that too. A show about Holly. For some reason, people brought this one up. I guess it's because she's a baby, which means she's got a clean slate, and pretty much they could do anything with her. That sounded sus. But I feel like because of her family's history, the only real outcome would be for her to become a depressed, distant teenager. Maybe someone who rebels for attention and just can't sit straight. She's growing up with no dad, a depressed mother, and a much older brother who'll be a grown adult by the time she's a teenager. If they were to do anything with her character, they'd have to do it in a movie, and it would have to be about connecting Holly and Skylar together whilst they deal with mental health issues. It could work, maybe. Okay, this is the last one. A sequel series starring Jesse in Alaska. I saw a pitch that mentioned him working with the police on a crime or something, but I don't know if that's the route the showrunners would take. Jesse's notorious for having bad relations with the police, so I doubt that he'd be working with them in any way. In the real world, he'd just be arrested anyway. He's committed too many crimes to stay free. And it wouldn't be that interesting seeing him in prison since we saw that with Saul. I think if they were to do a show about Jesse, they'd have to make it about him working a typical job, earning enough to get by and starting a family once again. Maybe there's still some PTSD left in him after Andrea and it causes some suspicion around the town. I don't know if he lives in a town or not, but it is Alaska and that has like 5 people anyway. It would be a very different kind of show with a much more light-handed approach to it. It could work, but could also feel jarring considering what kind of a show Breaking Bad was, as well as everything that Jesse went through in that show. It'd be very hard to do this pitch right, but I'd give it a B, or maybe a B- if it was there. I actually think the teenager Holly movie would be a better idea, but the Jesse show could also have just enough fan service to make it work. It feels like they'd have to create problems just to flesh it out, but if it ends right, it could work. Alright, that's it. Bye.